President Joe Biden has now made it crystal clear in a nationally televised interview that the U.S. will not lift any sanctions in order to get Iran back to the negotiating table. Iran would first have to stop enriching uranium before sanctions are lifted. So who will make the first move? Here's Iran's supreme leader.
If they want Iran's commitments, some of which it hasn't abided by, if they want Iran to return to its commitments, the U.S. must cancel sanctions completely, and not by words alone or on a piece of paper. No, they must cancel the sanctions in actuality, and we will verify and feel that the sanctions have been canceled correctly. Then we will return to our JCPOAA commitments. This is the Islamic Republic's definitive policy, and it is agreed upon by the officials of this country, and we will not back down from this policy. If we are speaking logically and reasonably, based on logic, the U.S. and the European countries who ignored all JCPOA commitments, these countries no longer have any right to set conditions for the JCPOA.
With us now is Dr. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., former deputy minister as well. Sir, thank you for your time. Look, do you think that President Biden wants a deal at all costs and is willing to blink first, so to speak, to make sure a deal gets done?
Good to be with you. I think it's a good way of putting it, blinking first. And no pun on the name of the Secretary of State, who's going to blink in first, is that the Iranians are saying that the West and the United States particularly have to lift sanctions before they come back to the negotiating table, before they go back to the levels of enrichment stipulated by the JCPOA. And the Americans are saying now, as of last night, that no, Iran first has to go back and comply with the JCPOA before the United States comes back to the negotiating table and lifts the sanctions. I think ultimately it would be reasonable to assume that some type of arrangement of reciprocity and timing will be worked out. And the United States will lift a couple of sanctions. Iran will go back a little bit toward to the Iranian enrichment levels of 2015. And ultimately we'll get back to the JCPOA. For the state of Israel, that is a very bad.
Tell me, even if the JCPOA levels are agreed to eventually, the fact that Iran has proceeded so rapidly with advanced centrifuges, the more advanced cadres of centrifuges, enriched uranium, the fact that they were already there, what does a return to the JCPOA really mean in practice?
Well, from an Israeli perspective, it means danger. Clearly, one of the fundamental fatal flaws of the JCPOA is that it doesn't just a nuclear program. It doesn't dismantle a single centrifuge. It doesn't dismantle any installation. And so the Iranians can simply decide within a moment to go back and enrich uranium to close to weapons grade very, very, very swiftly. And what you've seen now in recent weeks is the exposing of just how flimsy the JCPOA is. It's really no agreement at all. It ultimately doesn't even delay Iran's path to the bomb. So they can just decide to break out tomorrow.
So all of these, these centrifuges and the underground research and the work that's been done, at some point then, is military action the only way to stop the nuclear weapons program?
Not at all. The nuclear weapons program can be stopped through continuing pressure, punishing sanctions that will force Iran not just to mothball, not much merely to unplug the centrifuges, but actually to dismantle them, to actually take apart the Iranian nuclear program. And that is the only way to do that, with much more rigorous and penetrating international inspections, with the entire emphasis also on the Iranian commitment to making a nuclear warhead. Now, we know about this from the nuclear archive that was removed from Tehran by the Israeli Mossad. The archive showed that the Iranian nuclear warhead program that supposedly stopped in 2003, in fact, continued, simply went underground. Some of it hidden in leading universities within Iran. So there are 159 pages in the JCPOA. Exactly 1/2 of one page deals with weaponization, and it has no teeth at all. So in order for a Iran nuclear deal to be truly effective, not only does it have to dismantle the Iranian nuclear program, it has to address the very real and proven danger of an Iranian attempt to make a nuclear warhead.
Another big issue, sir, with regards to Biden's international relations approach the decision to re-engage, to re-enter the UN Human Rights Council after President Trump withdrew over it. Your thoughts on that and what it means for Israel?
Well, keep in mind that it wasn't President Trump alone who withdrew from the UN Human Rights Council. It was President Bush back in the earlier part of the century who withdrew America's ambassador from the Human Rights Council in protest, among other things, for its egregiously anti-Semitic approach to the state of Israel, singling out Israel, condemning Israel more frequently than any other country in the world combined, all other countries in the world combined, including North Korea, Syria, Iran, of course. And Israel is the only country that is investigated for human rights abuses and war crimes every year, according to the actual item 7 of the UN Human Rights Council. So it is inherently, fundamentally anti-Semitic, even by the definition of the UN. Now, President Obama, back in 2009, decided to go back into the Human Rights Council. It was against the advice of Israel, and I was there as ambassador at the time. The Obama administration claimed that by being present in the council, they could influence the resolutions, could soften some of the resolutions. And we warned that that wouldn't be the case, that in fact, America's presence in the Human Rights Council would simply legitimize its anti-Semitic position, wouldn't change it at all. And that is precisely what happened. And now the decision by the Biden administration to override the Trump administration's decision to pull out, which Israel very much welcomed, our fear will be unchanged, that America's presence there, even as an advisor, even as a non-voting sort of observer, will serve to legitimize the fundamentally anti-Semitic nature of this organization.